We're looking at this chapter 16 about youth and pastimes related with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, what did we? Can anybody recall what we learned yesterday, or what we studied yesterday? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mahaprabhu is also called Kaishora Lila. So he is doing a lot of activities, and Lord especially extend himself to the fallen souls. And like how the sinful persons of Jaga and Mada, how he liberated that persons, like that we saw Mataji. And in Kaishora Leela, both goddesses of Lakshmi and goddesses of fortune, goddesses of learning, how they worshipped Lord Mahaprabhu, like that they were saying, and how Kashmiri Pandit, how he conquered, how he was conquered by Mahaprabhu. All these pastimes we were seeing, and about Tapana Mishra, all these things we were recollecting, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
So today we are going to go more deeper with this Kashmiri Pandit. Here, yesterday we covered till 25th. So from 26 to 111, it is all about the conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Kashmiri Pandit. So how they are going to debate and how Lord wins over Kashmiri Pandit. So it is all about that conversation in all those verses, and what we can learn from those conversation we will see today. So from 26 to 40, it is mainly where the 100 verses is been talked, but the details of the 100 verse is not mentioned here.
बोलो किस नंबर पे करूं, बोलो जल्दी, वरना वो नंबर लेने में.
So from 41 to 46, Keshav Kashmiri's verses, the Lord challenges him, and from 49 onwards to 111, that is 111, the Lord tells him that there are 5 faults and 5 good things. So the Lord is able to find out among the 100 verse, one of the verses where he tells that there are 5 faults and 5 good things. So those things are being explained in those verses. And finally, this Kashmiri Pandit comes to know that he is competing against the Lord himself, and then he understands that, then he surrenders to the Lord. And yesterday we also read that after surrendering, what does Kashmiri Pandit do? He does not go on for all such debates. He takes to devotional practices, and then he comes into the one of the sampradaya. Which sampradaya was that? Which sampradaya does he takes to?
Nimbata Sampradaya.
Yes, correct. So today we'll go ahead. So you can raise your hands. We can recite the shlokas. Yes, Sachin Prabhu, you can read 27th verse.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Seyam Sakahi Tandrikari Namaskara Ya Suni Digvijay Kaila Apandhikara. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Offering my obeisances to Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, I shall try to describe that portion of the Lord's analysis which, when he heard it, made the Digvijay feel himself condemned. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So, as I told, this is just conversation, and here Kaviraj, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, since all the Chaitanya Leela is already told by Vrindavan Das Thakur in Chaitanya Bhagavat, but still Chaitanya Charitamrita is being told by the devotees to write. So he is first paying obeisances to Vrindavan Das Thakur, because this episode of Kashmiri Pandit with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is been elaborately explained in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So So most of the things which Vrindavan Das Thakur has covered, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is trying to bring it here in the simplest way, and which part he has not covered, he is trying to cover it here in Chaithanya Charitamrita and bringing the essence of all of that. So he is trying to describe only that portion of the Lord where the Lord gives him analysis of what is wrong in whatever Kashmiri Pandit is going to recite. So actually, in further verses we'll come to know he recites a verse, a poem of 100 verses. So in that, the what Lord does the analysis, we'll see about that. And because of that analysis, Digvijay is here been condemned. So we'll just go ahead. Yes, Maumita Mataji, you can read the 28th verse.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, after you, sorry.
Jyotsnavati Ratri Prabhu Shishya Gana Sange
Joshnavati Ratri Prabhu Shishya Gana Sange
Vashiyachena Ganga Tire Vidyara Prasange
Vashiyachane Ganga Tire
Vidyara Prasange.
Vidyara Prasange. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Once a full moon night, the Lord was sitting on the bank of the Ganges with his many disciples and discussing literary topics. Hare Krishna,
Yes.
Mataji.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna. So this Kashmiri Pandit, he had went all over the world and he has been successful over there. He has got the name Digvijay. So he comes to Navadvip. He has come to know that in Navadvip there are many scholars who are very good in debating and all. So he comes to Navadvip. So everyone comes to know about even this Digvijay Pandit or Kashmiri Pandit. And the Lord is thinking that since Kashmiri Pandit has come and he has got lot of pride, but it should not be, his pride should not be infatuated in front of public or in the public. It should be done in private. So he was thinking like this, and now the Lord is sitting on the bank of Ganges with his all students discussing about literary topics. So what happens there, we'll see. Yes, Gayatri Mataji, you can recite 29th verse.
Hare Krishna. हेन काले दिग्विजयी ताहानी आहिला गंगा रे वंदन करी प्रभु रे मिलीला.
Okay.
Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Coincidentally, Keshava Kashmiri Pandita came there while offering his prayers to Mother Ganges. He met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yes. So here, the Lord was thinking about him and he comes there. And here, only his disciples are there and no one else is there. So Kashmiri Pandit comes over here and he offers his prayer to Mother Ganges. And then he sees Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So now there is a conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Keshav Kashmiri. Okay. So the next verse, Uma Mataji, you can recite.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
वसैला तारे प्रभु आधार करिया दिग्विजयी काहे माने अवज्ञा करिया. Translation: The Lord received him with adoration, but because Keshava Kashmiri was very proud, he talked to the Lord very inconsiderately. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So here the Lord received him with adoration. So, and how Kashmiri was behaving? He talked to the Lord very inconsiderately, like not considering at all whoever is paying him respect or whatever. Why? Because one one is in proud state, they cannot see the things properly. They cannot judge also properly because of the pride they are facing. So he did not consider the Lord, and he did not receive him, or he did not greet the Lord nicely also. But how is the Lord receiving him? He is receiving him with full of adoration. Right? That is a difference between, not just because the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Lord here, he has come us to show how a devotee should be, right? So here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is showing with humility, with all the humbleness, and that how we should always adore people for whatever they are, even if they are devotees or not devotees, whatever position they are into or whatever they are good into, we need to adore them. So always seeing the good qualities in others and adoring about that. But when we become proud, we don't see that. We consider ourselves to be greater than everyone. So that is where, when pride comes, it leads to our own self-destruction. Okay. So Manasvi, you can read the 31 first verse.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Mataji. व्याकरण पदाः निमानि पंडिता तोमारा नामा बाल्याशास्त्रे लोके तोमारा काहे गुण ग्रामा. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I understand that you are a teacher of grammar, he said, and that your name is Nimai Pandit. People speak very highly of your teaching of beginners grammar. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
You can read the purport.
Yes, Mataji. Purport. Formerly, Sanskrit schools first taught grammar very thoroughly, and this system continues even now. A student was supposed to study grammar carefully for 12 years in the beginning of his life, because if one is expert in the grammar of the Sanskrit language, all the Shastras are open to him. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was famous for teaching grammar to students, and therefore Keshav Kashmiri first referred to his position as a teacher of grammar. Keshava Kashmiri was very proud of his literary career. He was far above the first lessons of grammar, and so he thought the position of Nimai Pandit not at all comparable to his own. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Manasvi. So here what is mentioned about Sanskrit, that they learn the grammar first in the Sanskrit language for 12 years, and when they become expert in that, they can go through all the Shastras. So now when Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita also, the Sanskrit language, the shlokas are there. The translation, the purport is provided for us by Srila Prabhupada here. Otherwise, only the 700 verses are being told. And just by the verses itself, those who are expert in that, they can analyze what does the shloka mean. So Prabhupada has made us just as simple as that, providing word to word meaning, the translation, and what is the essence of the verse through the purport. And here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was famous for grammar, and he's been just considered as a grammar teacher by Keshav Kashmiri here. He does not know anything about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here, and because of the proud or the pride of his career, literary career, that he's able so much of qualification. So what is Queen Kunti says, if you remember, in the first canto, anybody remembers the verse? The verse, we can see this. So Janma Ishwarya Shruta Shribir Idaman Madahapman Naivartyadin Vaitamakinchana Gocharam. So in this verse, Queen Kunti says, "My Lord, your Lordship can easily be approached only by those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty, cannot approach you with sincere feeling. So, now just like Keshav Kashmiri, who is proud of his literary career, cannot think anything other than that. So those who are materially and those who are materialistic people are always wants to gain more knowledge or gain that high qualification in the career, or have more money, all such things. Their ambitious is to become rich, right? So in all the ways to get the fame and name, that is the only mission. But for devotees, we are not going beyond all these things, but according to our karma or whatever, if it is been provided, like high birth or high knowledge or whatever, we should not be proud of it, right? Because that has been provided by the Lord. So we should make use of such capability in our devotional practices. So if one is very good in literary knowledge, like in Sanskrit or anything, they can study and preach to others, right? Similarly, whatever qualification or whatever things we have got, if we use it in Krishna's service, then it will be benefited for us. Instead of being just proud, it is no use, right? So we'll just go ahead. So here Keshav Kashmiri thinks Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just as a beginner's grammar teacher, and he is not at all comparable to him. But how does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu surprises him? We will see in coming verses. Yes, Shanti Mataji, you can recite this.
Mataji, after you, Mataji, please.
Yeah, yes, Mataji. Vyakaranam madhyajani padaha kalapa.
व्याकरणमध्यजानी पादः कलपा
सुनीलो न पंकिते तुम्हारा शिष्य रसम. Sorry. सुनीलो न पंकिते तुम्हारा शिष्य रसम लपा.
सुनीलो न पंकिते तुम्हारा शिष्येरा समलपा. Hare Krishna. Translation, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I understand that you teach Kalapa Vyakarna. I have heard that your students are very expert in the word jugglery of this grammar. Purport also, Mataji?
Yeah, you can read it.
Yeah, purport. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. There are many schools of grammar in the Sanskrit language, the most famous of which are the systems of Panini and the Kalapa and Kaumudhi grammars. There were different branches of grammatical knowledge, and a student of grammar was supposed to study them all in 12 years. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was famous as Nimai Pandite, taught grammar to his students, who became expert in dealing with the word jugglery of complicated grammar. Almost anyone expert in studying grammar interprets the Shastras in many ways by changing the root meanings of their words. A student of grammar can sometimes completely change the meaning of a sentence by juggling grammatical rules. Keshava Kashmiri indirectly taunted Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by implying that although he was a great teacher of grammar, such grammatical jugglery of root meanings did not require great expertise. This was a challenge to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because it was prearranged that Keshava Kashmiri would have to discuss the Shastras with Nimai Pandita. From the very beginning, he wanted to bluff the Lord. Bluff the Lord. Thus, the Lord replied as follows. Thank you, Hare Krishna Mataji.
So here we can understand one thing, that there were different systems of the Sanskrit related with grammar, and it took 12 years. But here, yesterday we learned that at the age of 11 itself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a teacher. So he would have finished all this grammar before he becomes 12, right? So, and he is already a teacher. So he would have finished it very early. And now he is teaching grammar to the students. So, and here it is mentioned that one who is an expert in the grammar can interpret the shastras and can juggle with the grammar. Just like, for example, the name Vasudev or Vasudev, right? There are two differences in that, right? So similarly, just by putting the names in different places, it can mean different meaning. So similarly, in that way, they were all expertise in such things. But here, still, Keshav Kashmiri felt that he is just a beginner for him and he cannot discuss Shastras with Nimai Pandit. But what does the Lord replies to him? Nirmala Mataji?
Hare Krishna Mataji. I will recite after you, Mataji.
Yeah. प्रभु कहे व्याकरण पदाय अभिमान करी
प्रभु कहे विजय करना पदाय अभिमान करी
शिष्य तेना बुझे आमी बुझाइते नारी
शिष्य तेना पूजे आनी आमी पूज्य दे नारी. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord said, yes, I am known as a teacher of grammar, but factually, I cannot impress my students with grammatical knowledge, nor can they understand me very well. Purport. Since Kesava Kashmiri was a little buffed up, the Lord increased his artificial pride by presenting himself as subordinate to him. Thus, he flattered him as follows. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So the Lord mentions that he is teacher of grammar, and here he is just trying to increase the pride, that inflated the pride. So when a balloon is filled with air, and when a certain level comes, it blasts. So here the Lord is also trying to increase his pride to a level and then to blast it, and then making him humble enough. So how is he flattering Keshav Kashmiri? We can see in the coming verses. Chitra Mataji, you can recite.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
कहाँ तुम्हें सर्वे शास्त्री कवित्वे प्रवीणा कहाँ अवनी सर्वे शिशु पदुया नवीना. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. My dear sir, whereas you are a very learned scholar in all sorts of scriptures and are very much experienced in composing poetry, I am only a boy, a new student, and nothing more. Hare Krishna.
So, how is he flattering? How the Lord is flattering Keshav Kashmiri? He's praising him that you are such a great scholar, learned scholar. You are so much having experience in composing poetry, and you know all sort of scriptures. And I am just a merely a boy, just a new student, and nothing else, right? So, Mohandas Prabhu, you can recite the 35th verse.
Hare Krishna Mataji. तुम्हारा कवित्व की चुनीते हया माना कृपा करी खारा यदि गंगाकारा वर्णना. Hare Krishna. Therefore, I desire to hear your skill in composing poetry. We could hear this if you would mercifully describe the glory of Mother Ganges. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So, here now he has glorified Keshav Kashmiri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he is asking him, so therefore, I want to hear your skill in composing poetry. So can you please glorify Mother Ganges? Can you recite some poetry by glorifying Mother Ganges? Now, when a person has been glorified, when his pride has been inflated, whatever you ask them, they just want to showcase that, yes, I'm good in reciting poetry or in composing poetry. So they want to showcase that, right? So Keshav Kashmiri agrees easily to that. And what does he does? Sakshi Mataji, you can recite.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
शुनिया ब्राह्मण गर्भे वर्णिते लघितला गति एके शत श्लोक गंगारावनीला. ट्रांसलेशन बाय शिला प्रभुपाद की शिला प्रभुपाद द्वारा शिला प्रभुपाद की जय. When the Brahmana Keshav Kashmiri heard this, he became still more puffed up, and within 1 hour he composed 100 verses describing Mother Ganges. Hare
So,
Krishna.
thank you. Thank you, Mataji. So what does this Keshav Kashmiri does? When he hears that to recite about Mother Ganges, he composes 100 verses. And here also he is in full of pride. So when you are in full of pride, whatever you work you do, it will be there with faults. So that is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tries to find out. Sudha Mataji, you can recite the 37th verse.
हरे कृष्ण माताजी.
Hare Krishna.
शुनिया करिला प्रभु बहुत सत्कारा, तोमा सम पृथ्वी ते कवि नाही आर. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Lord praised him, saying, Sir, there is no greater poet than you in the entire world. Thank you, Mother.
So how the Lord is, you can see how is he praising him, fluctuating his pride to extent. So he's telling there is no other poet or greater poet than in all the entire world. So this is self-understood. Bhuwana Mataji, you can recite 38th verse.
Yeah, Mataji. तोमारा कविता श्लोका बुझीते कारा शक्ति तुमी बाला जन अर्थ किमावा सरस्वती. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Your poetry is so difficult that no one can understand it, but you and Mother Saraswati, the goddesses of learning.
Yeah, purport Mataji.
Yeah, Mataji. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Replying to Keshava Kashmiri sarcastically, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indirectly minimized the value of his poetry by saying, yes, your compositions are so nice that no one but you and your worshipable mother, the goddesses of learning, can understand them. Keshava Kashmiri was a favorite devotee of Mother Saraswati, the goddesses of learning. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as the master of goddesses of learning, has the right to speak sarcastically of her devotees. In other words, although Keshava Kashmiri was proud of being favored by the goddesses of learning, he did not know that she is controlled by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thank you, Mataji. Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you. Thank you, Mataji. So here, how the Lord is telling to Keshav Kashmiri sarcastically that your poetry is so difficult that no one can understand it. But you and Mother Saraswati can only know it. So here Keshav Kashmiri is thinking that he has got the mercy of the Mother Saraswati, and being a favorite devotee, he is getting all the benefits from Mother Saraswati. But here, as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is mentioning, that he does not know that the Mother Saraswati is controlled by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by sarcastically speaking like that, he is minimizing the value of the poetry, whatever he has recited those 100 verses. Okay. So what does the Lord ask him to do? We'll see in this verse. Vinodini Mataji, you can recite this.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Eka sloke de artha yadi karani jamukhe suni sabaloge taba paya vibade sukhe. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. But if you explain the meaning of one verse, we can all hear it from your own mouth and thus be very happy. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you. So here he recited the 100 verse. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is asking him, we cannot understand the poem which you have recited. Can you explain at least one verse so that we can all hear it and enjoy it and feel happy? So he's asking like that. So what does Keshav Kashmiri reply to that? We'll see here. Saraswati Mataji, you can recite this.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Text 40. Tabe Dikvijayi Vyakyara Shloka Puchila Shata Slokera Eka Shloka Prabhuta Padila. Translation. The Dikvijayi Keshava Kashmiri inquired which verse he wanted the explanation. The Lord then recited one of the 100 verses Keshava Kashmiri had composed. Hare Krishna.
One of the 100 verses. So Keshav Kashmiri asks him which verse does he want explanation. So what does the Lord does here? He recites one of the 100 verses which Keshav Kashmiri had composed. So among the 100 verses, one verse the Lord has recited here. So for which he read an explanation from Keshav Kashmiri. So what is the reply for that by Keshav Kashmiri? We will see in this verse. Deval Mataji, you can recite this.
Mataji, after you, please.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Mahatvam Gangaya Satatam Idam Abhati Nitram.
Mahatvam Gangaya Satatam Idam Abhati Nittaram.
Yada Yesa Shri Vishnu's Charana Kamolatpati Subhav.
Yadesha Shri Vishnu's Charana Kamalotpati Subhaga.
Dvitiya Shri Lakshmir Eva Suranara Archa Charana.
Dvitiya Shri Lakshmi Riva Sura Narayarcha Charana.
Bhavani Bhatura Yaha Shirasi Vibhavati Adbhuta Guna.
Bhavani Bharturya Shirasi Vibhatyadbhuta Guna. Translation. The greatness of Mother Ganges always brilliantly exists. She is the most fortunate because she is emanated from the lotus feet of Sri Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. She is a second goddess of fortune, and therefore she is always worshipped both by demigods and by humanity. Endowed with all wonderful qualities, she flourishes on the head of Lord Shiva. Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. So this is the verse one of the verse which he has recited, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling he need an explanation in the verse. So what he has recited is Mother Ganges is always brilliantly there, and she's the most fortunate. Why? Because she's coming from the lotus feet of the Lord Vishnu. And she's also considered here second goddess of fortune because she's coming from the lotus feet, and she is also worshipped by demigods and also by us. And she is endowed with so many wonderful qualities, and she is also present on the head of the Lord Shiva. That is what the poem means. So what is the reaction of Keshav Kashmiri when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recited this verse and needed an explanation from him? Lalita Mataji, you can recite this.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Shlokera artakara prabhu yadi haila. Is haila bhela? Yeah. Vishmita hana digvijayi prabhu re puchila. Translation by His Grace Bhaktivedanta of Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him to explain the meaning of this verse, the champion, very much astonished, inquired from him as follows. Hare Krishna.
So here Keshav Kashmiri was not at all expecting that anybody can, because he was very expert, and within a second, like with so much fast, he has just recited that 100 verse. Nobody could even get a grasp of even a one word also. But here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him to explain the verse, and when Keshav Kashmiri asked him to which verse, he recited the verse itself, and he's asking him for the explanation. So now Keshav Kashmiri is astonished that how could he remember one verse also among those 100 verse. So he asks in astonishment to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So what does he ask? We'll see in this verse. Shubha Mataji, you can recite this.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I'll repeat Mataji.
Yeah. Chanchavata praya ami shloka padila.
Chanchavatha papraya ami shloka padila.
Tara madhya shloka tumi kaiche kante kaila.
Tara madhya shloka tumi kaiche kanta kaila. Translation Papada Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I recited all the verses like the blowing wind. How could you completely learn by heart even one among those verses? Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, he has recited like comparison is given like the blowing wind. So when there is a blowing wind, you cannot know what is happening over there. So that comparison is been given here. But when he has told it so fastly, when a wind is blowing, it is fasting, it will be in very fast, right? So here also he has recited it very fastly. But in that also, how were you able to even learn by heart one of that, right? Something which you have heard newly for the first time, you may get one line at least if we are so much good in that grasping. But here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you can understand how good he was, that he just learned by heart even at that moment one verse. So what explanation does what does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reply to Keshav Kashmiri for this? We will see this. Shri Priya Mataji, you can recite.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
प्रभु कहे देवरावरे तुम्ही कविवर आईचे देवरावरे के हो खाया श्रुतिदारा. Translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. The Lord replied, by the grace of Lord, someone may become a great poet, and similarly, by his grace, someone else may become a great Shrutidara who can memorize anything immediately. Hare Krishna.
You can read the purport, Mataji.
Okay, Mataji. Yeah. In this connection, Shrutidara is a very important word. Yeah. Shruti means hearing and Dara means one who can capture. Formerly, before the beginning of Kali Yuga, almost everyone, especially among the intelligent men, the Brahmanas, was the Shrutidara. As soon as a student heard any of the Vedic wisdom from his master, he would remember it forever. There was no need to refer to books, and therefore there were no written books in those days. The spiritual master delivered the Vedic hymns and their explanations to the student, who would then remember them forever without consulting books. To become a Shrutidara, one who can remember simply by hearing, is a great achievement for a student. In Bhagavad Gita 10.41, the Lord says, Yadyad vibhutimat sattvam Srimad Urjitam evava tattad eva gachatvam mam tejo masa sambhavam. Know that all opulent, beautiful, and glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. As soon as we find anything extraordinary, we should understand that such an extraordinary manifestation is the special grace of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied to the champion Keshav Kashmiri that Just as he was greatly proud of being a favorite devotee of Mother Saraswati, so someone else like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, being favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, could become a Shrutidhara and thus memorize anything immediately simply by hearing it. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. So here, what does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives him a reply? That somebody can, by the grace of the Lord, can become a great poet. Can become a great poet. And similarly, by the grace, the same grace of the Lord, another can become a great Shrutidhara, who can memorize anything immediately. So he is telling to Keshav Kashmiri that you have become a great poet by the mercy of the Lord. So similarly, I have also become Shrutidhara by the mercy of the Lord, who can memorize anything immediately. So here, what is that word Shrutidhara? We have seen that Shruti means hearing and Dhara means one who can capture anything or one who can remember immediately everything. So we see few people who can grasp very easily. They can just by hearing 2-3 times or once also, they can remember the shlokas or recite it, right? And here in earlier times, we have seen that, as I mentioned, Lord Krishna spoke Sanskrit verses, 700 verses, right? And that was in Sanskrit. So earlier, everything was like that. There was no reference to books or anything. Everything was just memorized and they just keep it in their memory, right? In their mind. But now we are in Kali Yuga, so we are all not into such a level. We are less intelligent, considered as less intelligent. So you can understand that we need not be proud here again, because in earlier time they were much more intelligent than us. So if anyone is having greater knowledge or anything, we can understand here there were people earlier who were more intelligent than us. So no need to become proud for anything out here. And here the mentioning about how the spiritual master delivers the Vedic hymns to all of them, and they just remember just by hearing, right? So how good is their hearing power, right? So we make notes, everything for all these things. So that is what is mentioned about here. And whatever you see extraordinary or anything, we must always remember that it is coming from the Supreme Lord. So in order, so we have to understand one thing here. Even in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10 is all about the glories of Krishna, right? Where the Lord is present. He's present in the water. We see in the 10th chapter, it is mentioned about all the glories. How the beautiful and glorious creation the Lord has created, we can understand from 10th chapter. So whatever extraordinary or things you see, that is all coming from the source. Who is the source? The Lord. And here, so he mentions, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells him that he is a Shrutidhara, that he can memorize anything immediately just by hearing it once. So in earlier also, when he was learning grammar, Sanskrit grammar from Gangadhar Pandit, he was able to memorize everything within once when Gangadhar Pandit had taught. So that is the thing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu we can see here. So then what happens? We will see in this. Mohandas Prabhu, you can recite this.
Yes, Mataji. Shlokera artha kaila vipra paya santosha Prabhu kahe kaha shlokera kiba guna dosha. Translation. Satisfied by the statement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Brahmana Keshava Kashmiri explained the quoted verse. Then the Lord said, "Now kindly explain the special qualities and faults in this verse." Hare Krishna Mataji.
Purport, Prabhuji.
Yeah, purport. Not only did Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pick out this one among the 100 verses and remember it, although the Brahmana had recited them like the blowing wind, but he also analyzed its qualities and faults. Not only did he hear the verse, but he immediately made a critical study of it. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So here he is giving now one back to back shocking for Keshav Kashmiri. So Keshav Kashmiri was okay. He agreed that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can be a Shrutidhara. He can remember that. But now, what is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealing to him? That you can now explain the special qualities and the fault in the verse. Right? Now he's speaking to him. He's speaking Keshav Kashmiri. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recited all the things, but now when he has recited which verse he wanted explanation, that he has mentioned. And now when he has recited that, not only by recitation, he has already, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has already analyzed the verse and find out what are the qualities in it and the faults in it. So he had already made a critical study, right? So within a fraction, how Keshav Kashmiri was able to tell all those 100 verses as blowing wind they are mentioning here. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving a good competition to him. He remembered the verses, he remembered which verse is having faults and special quality also. So he is mentioning it to Keshav Kashmiri here. And so what is the reaction of Keshav Kashmiri? We will see in this. Shameshwari Mataji, you can recite this.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna. विप्र कहे श्लोके नाही दोषेर आभास उपमा अलंकार गुण किचु अनुप्रास. Translation. The Brahmana replied, there is not a tinge of fault in that verse. Rather, it has the good qualities of similes and alliteration. Mataji, purport?
Yes, Mataji. Somebody mute.
Mataji, kids are behind.
Oh, it is coming from you. Okay.
Yes. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. In the last line of verse quoted by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the letter Bha is repeated many times, as in the words Bhavani, Bhartur, Vibhavati, and Adbhuta. Such repetition is called Anuprasa or alliteration. The words Lakshmir, Eva, and Vishnu's Charana Kamalotpatti are instances of Upama Alankara, for they exhibit metaphorical beauty. The Ganges is water and Lakshmi is the goddess of fortune. Since water and a person are not actually similar, the comparison is metaphorical. Thank you.
Yeah. So here some Sanskrit related things are there, like anuprasa and metamorphical things, where grammatically they are used alankaras when we are composing poems like this. So they use such words like alliteration, the words which is repeated many times, and some alankaras like how they describe the beauty. So that has been mentioned here. But when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Keshav Kashmiri that there is fault and the good things also, but what is his reply to that? he mentioned that there is no fault in his verse, but rather it has good qualities of similes and alliteration. So what is alliteration here? Like some of the words which keeps repeating, it gives a better for the composition of poems. So he mentions that there is no fault in his verse. So what does the Lord tells? We will see that. Anybody else who has not recited?
Hare Krishna Mataji, can I
Kavita Mataji?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes, Mataji.
Mataji, after you, please.
Yes. प्रभु कहे न कही यदि न कर रोसा,
प्रभु कहे न कही यदि न करा भरोसा,
कहा तो मारे ही श्लोका की अच्छे दोषा.
कहा तो मार ई श्लोका की बा अच्छे दोषा. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The Lord said, "My dear sir, I may say something to you if you will not become angry. Can you explain the faults in this verse?"
Yeah. So now, how is the Lord replying? Very humbly, right? He's telling, my dear sir, right? He's telling very humbly that can I say something now? Because he is considering himself as a merely a boy in front of Keshav Kashmiri is considering himself as a merely as a boy. Not only in words, he is behaving in that way. The Lord is behaving in that way only. So we can come out to know through his words. I may say something to you if you will not become angry. So he's again asking him, sir, don't get angry, but can you explain the fault in the verse? He's again asking him to explain the fault in the verse. Rupali Mataji, you can recite the 48th verse.
Mataji, I will repeat after me.
Okay. प्रतिभा काव्य तोमार देवता संतोषे,
प्रतिभा काव्य तोमार देवता संतोषे,
भला मते विचारिले जानी गुण दोषे,
भला माते विचारिले जानी गुण दोषे. Translation. There is no doubt that your poetry is full of ingenuity, and certainly it has satisfied the Supreme Lord. Yet, if we scrutinizingly consider it, we can find both good qualities and faults. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. So here the Lord is telling that there is the poem which Keshav Kashmiri has composed is very nice. It has even satisfied the Supreme Lord. But when we scrutinizingly see the poem in terms of grammar or in composition, it has both the good qualities and there are few faults also. So what does Keshav Kashmiri tell to that? Yes, Saurabh Prabhu, you can recite this.
Hare Krishna. Tate bhala kari shaloka kara vichara, kavi kahe ye kahile shi vidashara. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The Lord concluded, now therefore, let us carefully scrutinize this verse. Mataji, purport also?
Yes, Matas Prabhu.
Purport. The poet replied, yes, the verse you have recited is perfectly correct. Hare Krishna, Dandot Pranam Mataji.
Yes. So the Lord is asking Keshav Kashmiri to check the verse, to find out, to go through the verse, scrutinizingly check the verse. And the poet also told that whatever he has recited is perfectly correct. So he is not agreeing to whatever the Lord is mentioning, that there are faults, but he is not agreeing that there is no faults in his poem. So from here, he does not agree about the faults. Then the Lord himself tells him where the fault is. So those things will come to know in the next few verses. which will continue tomorrow. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.